Let's continue. We're on page 23b, and the Gemara that we learned was about a person should walk and exercise a little before they eat a meal, so that they won't have to excuse themselves during the meal. And then the Gemara said that a person should take off their tefillin either before they enter to eat the meal, or right at the table they take their tefillin off. Two different opinions. There was a Reb Yitzchak and a Reb Chia. Reb Yitzchak said you take off your tefillin before you enter, and Reb Chia said no, take them off and put them on the table. Now the reason why you don't wear tefillin when you're eating a meal is because we're afraid that you might drink and get drunk. It wouldn't be appropriate for the tefillin. So therefore, if you're having a established meal, a person is not allowed to wear tefillin. Rashi says, Shema yishtaker b'seuda, lest the person becomes shikr in their meal. So that's the reason why you can't wear tefillin during a established meal. And I mentioned the established meal is eating more than eating an egg size of bread. That would be an established meal. And possibly eating an egg size of mezainis as well, I guess. I have to see if they say anything about that.
Isn't an established meal a meal at which you wash?
No.
Thank you.
Maybe the time is an established meal has to be a certain amount of time, maybe.
By the law of an established meal regarding sukkah, and this is
Rabbi, you
yes.
Turn away from the thing and I can't hear.
Oh, you can't hear me. Okay, fine. Thank you. So an established meal follows the law of sukkah. By a sukkah, you're not allowed to eat outside of a sukkah. And the law is it depends on an established meal or not. And the law is over there regarding a kibetza, an egg size. So here in the Mishnah Berurah, he says, Nira deshira achilas arei hu kibetza gedin sukkah. So he brings it down in the last Mishnah Berurah on chapter 40. So that's what it seems like. That's what I don't know if others argue with that, but that's the Mishnah Berurah, which is the main source of one of the main sources of halacha. So that would be an established meal is a size of an egg. Now, so we said that for an established meal, you're not allowed to wear tefillin, and the Gemara then said that. You take it off until the time it comes to say the grace after meal. When you're about to say the grace after meal, the benching, you would put the tefillin back on. So you keep in mind that we're talking about people. Now, this is not in Israel nowadays. This is in the olden days. So someone mentioned that they thought that we mentioned that it's in Israel. It's not true. In Israel, they also don't wear tefillin all day. It's what we're talking about in the previous generations back, when they would be able to concentrate and be able to concentrate on the holiness of the tefillin. So they would wear tefillin all day. And even when they walked in the street, they would be wearing their tefillin. So that is why they would be entering your house and they wanted to take their tefillin off. So they would just put the tefillin on the table because they're coming to eat. Now, then the Gemara here continues, and it talked about putting tefillin inside a kerchief or some other bag with money. Is that appropriate or not? So the Gemara said we learned one brisa says you can do it, and another brisa says you can't. So how do you reconcile this contradiction? So the Gemara said it's not a problem. One case is talking about where you prepared to this bag for tefillin, specially designated the bag for tefillin. And the other case is where you didn't designate the bag for tefillin. And because you didn't designate it for tefillin, You didn't. Therefore, you would be allowed to use the same kerchief for tefillin and for money. Of course, not putting it in the same little pouch where where the tefillin is. So it's not exactly touching the tefillin, and it's not with exactly the tefillin, but it's in the same pouch is being used, the same kerchief is being used. But nevertheless, it's permissible if you didn't designate it for tefillin. But if you did designate it for tefillin, then there are two opinions. One opinion is once you use it for tefillin, that is, then it becomes completely designated for tefillin. You wouldn't be allowed to use that kerchief for money at all. The other opinion is that you don't even have to use it. Once it's designated for tefillin, and therefore it would be prohibited, even if you didn't use it once. So these are two opinions, and that's where we ended yesterday. These two opinions about, it's called hazmana. Hazmana is preparing something for a mitzvah. If you're allowed to use it then for other purposes. This laws of hazmana apply. The Gemara's about hazmana. The main source of this Gemara of Abaye's statement that hazmana milsahi refers to sewing garments for it's called tachrichem, garments for a deceased person. Would you be allowed to then benefit from those garments if, for whatever reason, you want to use them for something else? So once they were sewn for that purpose, do they take on the prohibition of benefiting from something using something that was set aside for a deceased person? And that's one case, but it applies throughout the Talmud. Hazmana, preparing something for a mitzvah. I'll give you an example. If you pour oil for your Hanukkah menorah, are you allowed to use it for something else? You say, oh, you know what? I'm not going to be. This is the last night of Hanukkah. You turn out, your wife says, no, we're going to a hotel tonight. So you end up going to the hotel. You light your temporary menorah. In the meantime, you come back home. You have your oil that's in your menorah, olive oil. And why should you throw it out? It's an issue of hazmana. You prepared it for a mitzvah. Does it become? And then comes a more complicated case would be if you used the menorah, but the menorah, the light went out early. In other words, it blew out. The wind blew out your menorah. Would you be allowed to use that oil for maybe for another night of Hanukkah? Because it was prepared for a different night. Are you allowed to benefit from it? Or could you use it to fry an egg in? Could you take that oil and just fry an egg? You ran out of oil and you have some oil that wasn't burned so can you use it? Many rabbis advise that when you pour oil for Hanukkah, you make a condition and say, whatever is not used, I am not designating for the mitzvah. And then you would be, of course, allowed to use it because you didn't designate it for the mitzvah. But if you designate it for the mitzvah, it could be an issue of benefiting from it because it's really designated already for a mitzvah. Hazmana, again, it all boils down to this concept of hazmana, preparing something. Here we're talking about preparing something for tefillin. If you prepare a bag for tefillin, you can't then go and use it. For if you're designating it for tefillin, you wouldn't be allowed to use it then for a money pouch. So and we have two opinions here. Does it have to be used once also, in addition to preparing it for a mitzvah? Does it also have to be used once, or just preparing it? Does that do it? Is that alone enough? Abaye says that hazmana milsahi. If you designate it, even if you didn't use it, designating prohibits it for mundane use. Now we're up to the next Gemara. The next Gemara, Ba'a Minei Rav Yosef, Bereid Rav Nechunya. Rav Yosef, we're 6 lines up from the bottom of the page, or 7 lines up from the bottom of the page on 23b. Ba'a Minei, Rav Yosef, the son of Rav Nechunya, asked from Yab Yehuda, Mahu sheyanich tefillin tachas merash Yosef. What is the law about a person putting tefillin under his headrest? So he's going to be sleeping there. Can he put tefillin under his pillow? Are you allowed to sleep with tefillin under your pillow? because basically we're talking about, again, we have to keep in mind, we're thinking about in old days, the pauper times, the poverty-stricken times. People had small little, tiny, a tiny apartment with no furniture, and they had no place to put their tefillin, and so they're going to put it under their pillow. So it's under one's headrest. Would a person be allowed to put his tefillin there? It's for safety purposes, for simply, this is his only location, or his best location that he finds. So tachas margaloisav like under one's footrest, person would not. There's no question of that. It's not appropriate. Shanoyig ben minig bizayin. This is considered a disgrace for the tefillin. Kikami boile. When am I asking the question? Tachas marashoisav, specifically under one's head, not under one's feet. Under one's headrest, that would be where this question applies. Mine, what is the law? Amar lei hachi amar Shmuel. So Rav Yehuda said back to Rav Yosef, this is what Shmuel said, mutter. This is permissible. Afilu ishta ima, even if a person's wife is with him, in other words, they sleep. His wife is going to be sleeping in the same bed. Nevertheless, it would be permissible to place the tefillin under one's headrest, under one's pillow. So that's what Shmuel said, and which means that even if the person might have relations with his wife, it's not going to be a problem. Now, how could it not be a problem? How could you have tefillin in your room if a person's with their spouse? And the answer is because the tefillin would be double covered. You need to have a double covering over the tefillin in order to have relations in a room. There has to a tefillin or any other holy item would need to be double covered. One covering could be designated for that item. The other covering has to be a non-designated bag. So in other words, the tefillin bag would be one bag, and then you would have another bag, and you'd put the tefillin in an additional bag. That would be the option. That would be the ability to have your tefillin in the room. Now here we're talking about tefillin. Let's say it's under one's pillow. So pillow itself would be considered one covering. And then the tefillin, nowadays we have tefillin bags. I don't know, in the olden days, it doesn't seem like they had tefillin bags, but let's say a person would have their tefillin bag, then it would be permissible under their head. Again, we're talking about a case where there's no other place to put the tefillin. Obviously, this is, in a scenario where one is a tight, where one is stuck and he doesn't have other options. So we want to know if he could put it under his head. And the answer is yes, even though he might have relations, his wife is going to be sleeping with him in bed. Nevertheless, this would be considered, this would be allowed. And so it's double covered, but even so, it's a question. That's the question, and this is what Shmuel answers. Now the Gemara asks a question on Shmuel. We have a brisa that says the opposite. Meisvei. They asked the Bnei Yeshiva, the people of the yeshiva, they asked a question on Shmuel's law. Lo yaniach adam. It says in a brisa, it says it in a source, a Tanoic source, that lo yaniach adam tefillin tachas margalois. A person shouldn't place tefillin under one's feet, under one's footrest. B'pnei shenoig ben derech bizayin. That's considered a disgrace. Aval manichan tachas marashaisav. But a person can place it under their headrest. But if a person's wife was with him, usher, that would be prohibited. So Shmuel said, even if a person's wife is with them, it's permissible. And here we're saying that that it's prohibited if a person's wife is with him. It's prohibited to have the tefillin under their headrest. So now it gives another example where it's permissible. If there is a extension attached to the bed that's either 3 handbreadths above, or a namach gimel tvachim, or it's 3 handbreadths below. Let's say there's some extension from the bed that extends out, and it would be a place to put tefillin. So if you put it on such an extension that's that measurement, like 9 and 10 inches, somewhere between 9 and 10 inches away from the height of the bed. So that would be mutter, that would be permissible. So what comes out from here is there's an argument between Shmuel and a brisa. Very surprising, because Shmuel is called an Amoira. He's from much later. And a brisa is from the earlier rabbis. And generally, they wouldn't argue. The later rabbis of the Amoraim, they wouldn't argue with the earlier rabbis. you normally wouldn't argue with the earlier rabbis because it was an established rule that, the earlier rabbis were in a whole different league than the later rabbis. So the rabbis of the Mishnah were in one league, and the rabbis of the Talmud were in a different league, and they don't argue with each other. And here we have Shmuel saying that something is permissible, even though the earlier rabbis said that it's prohibited if a person's with their spouse, with their wife in bed and sleeping with the tefillin in the bed under their headrest. And so Shmuel said it's permissible. The Brisa says it's prohibited. So the Gemara says, Tiyufta de Shmuel Tiyufta, we have proven Shmuel wrong. We have disproven Shmuel's statement. So therefore it will be prohibited to sleep with tefillin if a person's with their wife and they want to put the tefillin in their under their headdress. Amar Rava, and now Rava says the most shocking statement here. He says, Aval Gav de Tanya Tiyufta de Shmuel Tiyufta de Shmuel, even though we learned that this is disproven Shmuel, nevertheless, halacha kavase, the halacha follows him. So we've disproven him. Rava says, even so, the halacha still follows him. And my time, what's the reason? And here we turn the page, we go to the next page, 24a, call linturinhu fei odif. Anything that's going to be safety, to watch it better, whatever is going to watch it better, odif is better, is best. And here that this was going to save the tefillin from the mice, from the thieves. So this is better to put it under your pillow than and so therefore it becomes it. Therefore we follow Shmuel because this is actually benefiting. It's honoring the tefillin. The question is, obviously, the other opinion of the Brisa knew about the mice and knew about the fact that there might be ganovim that will steal the tefillin. Nevertheless, the Brisa said that you're not allowed to put the tefillin under one's headrest. So how is Shmuel allowing this and saying it's permissible? And how's the Gemara saying, well, we follow Shmuel because of this reason? Well, the Brisa also knew this reason. And how could Shmuel argue with the Brisa? Again, this is very surprising. And then Rava comes along and says, and we follow Shmuel. So not only is Shmuel, it's surprising that he's arguing with the Brisa. Here we have Rava saying the halacha follows him. And then it gives a reason, which would seem that the reason is pretty simple because the other opinion also understood that reason. So the commentaries try to struggle with this, and there are two answers that are given. One answer is that normally a Moira doesn't argue with the Tana because they knew that if they argue with the Tana, with an earlier rabbi, they're going to find out that they're wrong later. So it's not worth arguing. Don't even try, because you're going to just find out later. You'll learn a few more years, and then you're going to realize, that's the reason that rabbi said this. I should never have argued in the first place. So therefore, if you want to be smart and be practical, don't even think that you should argue. Just listen to what they say. In a few years, you'll understand what they say, or in a few months, or a few days, a few hours. But don't try to argue. That's the way the rabbis. That's the Amiram. They never would argue with the earlier rabbis. This is based on a Kesef Mishnah in the laws of Mamrim, the laws of the laws of being rebellious against the rabbis. This is in those laws. The Kesef Mishnah mentions this idea, and that's why Rav Tana Upolig, it says Rav used to argue with the Tanoim. Why would Rav argue? He was in the generation that was right after. But his friends didn't argue with the Tana, but he did. Why did he? Because he said, I'm on the level that I'm confident that I can argue with them. So he felt confident that he could. But most of the rabbis felt that they would be foolish if they would argue, because they're going to ultimately find out that they're wrong. So here we have a scenario where Shmuel felt the same way, just like Rav. He was in the same time period, and therefore he felt, listen, I can also I feel that in this situation I am confident that I can argue with the earlier Tanoim. Again, they were in the generation that was like the gray generation. They were in the generation right afterwards. So
gray area.
Therefore, they felt that therefore Shmuel and Rav felt that there were scenarios where they wouldn't argue all the time, but there were scenarios where he argued, and here is one of the cases where Shmuel argues, maybe one of a kind. Now, the other answer is that they don't go with this. That a Moira cannot argue with the Tana, and that's automatic. And the answer they give is, how does Shmuel argue with these other Tana, with this brisa? How does Shmuel argue? The answer is because Shmuel follows the earlier brisa that we learned, and if you develop that thought of that brisa, it ultimately comes to this law that Shmuel says, meaning it's based on the same logic. What was the opinion of the brisa that Shmuel is relying on? Again, Shmuel found another source of the Tanoim, and therefore he's able to argue on this brisa because he's really following.
Back in the kitchen, right?
Because he's really following.
Okay.
Let me just mute everyone. He's really following a different brisa. Which brisa is he following? He's following the brisa that was the argument, the three-way argument. There was a brisa that argued Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, and Rabbi Akiva. Beis Shammai said, don't bring a tefillin into a bathroom. Leave it outside. It's going to get stolen. It might get stolen. It doesn't matter. Don't bring it into a bathroom. Beis Hillel said, no, bring it into the bathroom. Rabbi Akiva, bring it in the bathroom, but cover it with your clothing. So three-way argument in the previous brisa. Now, what was the logic behind that brisa? So understand the logic. The logic was, is it more appropriate to bring tefillin in a bathroom versus getting stolen? Are we more careful of the tefillin not getting stolen or not having mice peck at it or whatever? Or is it better to bring it into a bathroom? That was the argument earlier. So here we come to the same, this is a similar discussion, bringing it in your bedroom with your wife. Is that appropriate to have under your pillow or not? Because on the one hand, you're saving it from the ganavim. On the other hand, it's not the perfect scenario. It's not the perfect honor and respect for the tefillin. So which one overrides the other? What's more important? And here Shmuel follows that logic of that brisa that we mentioned earlier, and that's why Rava says the halacha follows Shmuel, because Shmuel's not really disproven. He's disproven from this brisa, the one here, but the other brisa he fits with, and that would be the halacha, and that's why we would follow that. Yes, Ezra.
And I think it's the fact also that the tefillin is inside of a bag and also covered a second time that allows who says it that even though it's a problem, even though he's been disproven, we still follow him. I think that's the one thing that saves the situation.
Well, what you're saying is very, very interesting, because what you're really saying is that you want to differentiate between the two brisas, and you want to say that maybe the brisa that seems to contradict Shmuel, as Shmuel's contradicting, that brisa is talking about maybe when it's not a double covering. But if it would be a double covering, then it would be permissible. I think that's what you're getting at, which is an interesting thought, because the rabbis the commentaries do try to explain that maybe it's not a contradiction, and therefore the halacha can follow Shmuel. I know they discussed this, and let me just see.
Rabbi Smith, I have to leave early. I can't stay the whole class.
Okay, sei gesund. Take care.
Well, to everyone, stay safe.
So I'll have to look up if any of the commentaries say that, Ezra. But in any event, this is the story with Shmuel and the brisa. But again, it doesn't apply so much nowadays, because we have houses, we have apartments, so the tefillin should not need to be under one's pillow. We also have mice traps and rat traps and poison. There's should be other options to that the mice shouldn't. And we also have the tefillin in a bag, so the mice, it's hard for them to get to the tefillin. And ganavim, we have locks on our doors. We have security and whatever you call those new cameras that they have outside. Ring, was it called Ring? I forget what they're called. Yeah. So anyway, you have all these different gadgets, so we don't have to be so worried. Anyway, sei gesund, everyone. And
Rabbi Smith?
Yes.
I have two very short, one question, one comment. It sounds like the final halakha is coming down because it's better to protect it and have it than to lose it or have it destroyed. It sounds like that could be part of the argument. I don't know if it is or not.
In other
The
words,
second-
disgrace versus destruction. What's better,
Yeah.
disgrace or destruction?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Okay, good point. I like that. Okay.
And the second thing, this idea of hazmana with designated this bag for tefillin, how did it become that way? Because I decided it. So can I later decide, say, you know what, I'm making now a new hazmana, and it's not going to be for tefillin. Now it's going to be to hold my money.
I don't think you can do that.
No, once you can't
Holy.
bring that, once something goes up in Kedusha, you can't bring it
Good,
down.
good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ezra.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, great. Very good. Okay, sei gesund, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, take care.
Bye, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.